This is Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review with your college football weekend preview. We're going to break down several of the Marquis Saturday games, and we're going to begin with Duke and Pittsburgh. How about the Pittsburgh Panthers? Let's give them a tip of the hat, a little round of applause, bravo, whatever, whatever you want to say about them, to give them props, to give them praise and kudos for what they did last week, do it, because they took down the Clemson Tigers, an impressive win last week, battling back to get that victory. But you do get concerned a little bit about a letdown here for the Pittsburgh Panthers. And how about the streak that the Pittsburgh Panthers are on? 9 straight games over the total. And it hasn't even been close. They've been hitting the 70s and the 80s in the majority of these games in terms of total points scored. And it's not like they play with a ton of offense or fast pace or tempo. This is just a team that's very efficient offensively. They run the football very well with James Conner. They get play action pass out of Nathan Peterman. And when they get in the red zone, they score touchdowns, not settle for field goals, and their defense is just awful. It's just been shredded by basically every team they've played this season. And you put all those elements together, and you get a team that's gone 9 straight games over the total. And this Duke team, despite a lot of injuries on offense, Jella Duncan injured, Thomas Sirk, the quarterback, was lost early in the year. Now, you would think this Duke team offensively would just go away, but it hasn't happened. David Cutcliffe deserves a lot of credit. This Duke offense can still move the ball. They've still got playmakers. Daniel Jones, the young freshman, Mr. Jones, he's doing a pretty decent job here at the quarterback position for Duke. I mean, he's moving the football. He's making some plays. He's got a little bit of mobility. Total in this game sitting at around 63.5, 64. It would not shock me in the least to see yet another Pittsburgh game fly over the total, and I'd be reluctant to lay 7.5 with Pittsburgh in this spot. Letdown potential after that Clemson win, so lean to Duke and also over the total, 63.5, 64 in that game. All right, next up we've got Indiana, Michigan. I would be leery about laying this many points with Michigan. Michigan is in a situation where, for them, it's about winning the game, not necessarily winning it by margin. They'll be more than happy with a 3-touchdown victory, but a 3-touchdown victory ain't going to make Michigan backers happy because it's not going to cover this number. So you got to be careful here with Michigan. New quarterback now, John O'Korn. Now, John O'Korn has plenty of starting experience from his days with the Houston Cougars. He's a very capable quarterback as he takes over for the injured Wilton Spate, but it doesn't mean he's going to be able to just rush right into this starting role and click right away with this Michigan offense. It could take him some time. And Indiana does have a capable offense. Richard Lago, the quarterback, more than capable. So, Indiana could fall behind early in this game, be able to come through the back door and get some points if they fall behind. So that's always a concern. I'm just not really rushing out there to lay 23.5, 24 with Michigan here in this game. Maybe some value on Indiana, but there's got to be some concern, at least in my mind, there's some concern with Indiana bouncing back for this game, even though it's a big opponent after the way they lost that game against Penn State last week. They had that game won. They just let it slip away in the fourth quarter, and then, of course, that brutal sack fumble leading to the return for a touchdown that just crushed the backs of Indiana bettors in that game. A brutal, brutal beat. If you had Indiana plus 7.5 last week against Penn State, that's about as bad as it gets. Horrendous, awful way to lose a bet there. You're just concerned maybe a little hangover from that type of just demoralizing loss for Indiana, but not looking to lay that many points with Michigan here in this game. Oklahoma, West Virginia. We've got a big-time showdown here in the Big 12, and I know Oklahoma's offense is rolling right now. That's all you're hearing from the talking heads. It's, how good this Oklahoma offense is. And it is great. I mean, Baker Mayfield's done a great job. Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine, a phenomenal 1-2 punch at running back. It's a tough offense to stop. They can throw it, they can run it against you. But you're talking about West Virginia at home as an underdog, and I think they're the better of these teams defensively. I don't think there's even a question about that. West Virginia's defense has been one of the best defenses they've had since Dana Holgorsen has been the head coach there. And to me, you can get plus points at home with an underdog that is the better defensive team, the defensive dog, so to speak. I have to lean to West Virginia here, even though that Oklahoma offense has been so impressive. And let's not totally forget how West Virginia's got a pretty capable offense, too. Skylar Howard, their quarterback's had a very solid season, can put up points against an Oklahoma defense that to me is not even close to being as good as it's been in the past, or maybe even as good as West Virginia on that side of the ball. Oklahoma the better offense, but give me the better defense catching points here at home. I'd lean to West Virginia in that game. It's not a strong opinion because West Virginia really hasn't been battle tested. They've struggled at times in some of their step up in class games, but I don't trust Oklahoma and that defense specifically, that defense on the road laying points of any kind against a quality foe that'll be motivated for this one. So I'll lean a little bit. It'll be a small bet for me, but West Virginia here at +3 in that game. All right, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame. Notre Dame, to me, I know they've had some signs of, showing some life down the stretch after a dismal start to the season, but give me Virginia Tech here +1. I mean, I've liked Virginia Tech from the get-go this season. I've liked their quarterback, Gerard Evans, dual threat quarterback, can run, can throw. Justin Fuente doing a good job with this team in his first year as the head coach. They're responding well to him. Bud Foster's defense is still making some plays. And I think if this game's close in the latter stages, I trust Virginia Tech's defense to make a stop a hell of a lot more than I trust this Notre Dame defense, which has just been an absolute disaster for them all season long. I think Virginia Tech wins that game. Look to the Hokies at +1 in that game. How about Kansas State, Baylor? Baylor to me is a bet against team right now. Struggling on the field, not the same Baylor team as they've had in years past, not the same level of success they've had in years past. Now you got players flapping their gums about, we miss Art Briles, we're trying to, stand up for him a little bit here. Yeah, and Jim Grobe is trying to make it sound like, it's a good thing, but this Baylor team's not focused off the field, struggling on the field. They got absolutely embarrassed in their last home game against TCU. I mean, TCU's down this year. They haven't played very good football, and they still went into Baylor, into Waco, and absolutely pasted the Baylor Bears a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, Baylor did play a little bit harder, a little bit better against Oklahoma last week, but it still wasn't good enough to do anything more than get blown out by more than 3 touchdowns. So this Baylor team to me is a mess right now. I think Kansas State, I know Kansas State, you worry about them a little bit. Their offense can be pedestrian at times, but I think they're going to be able to move the ball against a very shaky Baylor defense, be able to put some points, do enough, get enough stops on the other side of the ball to come out of here with a win. Just don't like the situation at all in Baylor. It's toxic off the field. They're struggling on the field. They're on a downward spiral right now. I'll look toward Kansas State laying less than a field goal on the road in that football game. Washington State, Colorado. How about this game? Who would have thought the Cougars and the Buffaloes in mid-November would be a huge game on the schedule, but it is. Washington State can still win the Pac-12 North. It's all set up to be decided in that Apple Cup showdown on Thanksgiving weekend against Washington. Could really honestly come down to that. So it could be a big game there upcoming for the Cougars, but first they got to get by Colorado, a good Colorado team. To me, this is a tough game to bet. It really is. I've liked Colorado from the get-go. I've made some money with Colorado this year, and I've made a ton of money with Washington State, not only this year, but last year as well. It's 2 teams I like, 2 teams I don't want to bet against. Should be a great game in this one, although it is worth noting. Colorado's been tough in Boulder. Washington State without River Craycraft at wide receiver. That's a big loss in that receiving core. I think he's one of their next best receivers behind Gabe Marks. So Luke Falk, as good a quarterback as he is, going to have to find some other targets to step up for him at receiver. But Washington State in this underdog role, they've been fantastic. They have been just awesome in the road underdog role the last couple of years under Mike Leach. This team is as good a team as Mike Leach has had at Wazoo. Great quarterback and Luke Falk, explosive passing attack. They're running the football this year. Can you believe it? All this air raid nonsense. Washington State's been able to run the football this year a little bit, and they're playing defense for at least for a little bit. They've got a decent defense here too, Washington State. So if I had to bet it, I would actually lean to the Cougars +4.5. But I like this Colorado team a lot too. Mike McIntyre's done a great job there. It's a game I'm going to be more excited to watch, to be honest, than excited to bet. Let's move on down the card, and let's take a look at Ohio State, Michigan State. And Ohio State's in the same boat as Michigan. I mean, it's a more than 3 touchdown favorite, and not one I'm rushing to the betting window to support. Ohio State doesn't need to win this game by a huge margin, by more than 3 touchdowns. They'll just be satisfied with a win. And let's not forget, Michigan State, for as bad as it's been, as bad as the defense has been, as inconsistent as Tyler O'Connor, the quarterback, and this Sparty offense has been, we're starting to see some signs of life from the Spartans. We are. I mean, they're starting to play a little bit better here as of late. They crushed Rutgers. They showed up against Michigan, covered the spread wire to wire in that game, even though they lost. we're seeing effort from Mark D'Antonio's squad, and Mark D'Antonio deserves credit for getting his team to keep playing hard down the stretch of a difficult, disappointing season. But they have, and if there's one game they're going to be up for here at the end of this season, not going bowling, it's going to be this game here against Ohio State. For sure. I think it's a game when you look at it, they are going to be looking at, hey, we got a chance here to put up a good showing. We'll be up for this game. So I'm not saying I love Michigan State. In fact, probably won't even bet it, but if I had to give a lean here, I'd lean to Michigan State, Sparty at plus 22.5 in that game. All right, let's wrap it up with our play of the week in college football. We're going to go off the grid a little bit. Georgia Southern and Georgia State. And Georgia State, to me, has really had a difficult season, especially of late. They've missed Nick Arbuckle, their quarterback from last year. Their offense hasn't been the same. Their defense has been shredded. They lost at home last week, Georgia State. 12.5-point home favorite against a horrible UL Monroe team. UL Monroe's been the worst team in the Sun Belt this season. They lose that game not only outright, but they lose by double digits. Just a terrible showing for Georgia State in that game. Awful against UL Monroe. Now you got to bounce back and face Georgia Southern, and Georgia Southern is definitely not the same quality team that they've been the last couple of years when Willie Fritz was the head coach. They miss Willie Fritz. They haven't been the same team this year, but I think Georgia Southern's coming to play in this game. I really do. And when you look at last year's meeting between these two Sun Belt in-state rivals, Georgia State didn't just beat Georgia Southern. They annihilated Georgia Southern, and it was a stunning upset because that was a good Georgia Southern team that year. Georgia Southern ends up winning that game 34. Georgia State rather wins that game 34-7. Outgains Georgia Southern 489-203. Brutal loss for the Georgia Southern in that game. I think that game leaves this one circled on their schedule. I think they want some payback. I think they want a little revenge here. Georgia State plays at the Georgia Dome. There's no home field whatsoever. It's an empty stadium. I don't give them any home field edge for playing in this stadium, and that's why it's not surprising to see they've gone 0-2 straight up and against the spread last two home games in Sun Belt play. I think Georgia Southern comes into this game with a chip on their shoulder. They're 4-6. They can still get to a bowl game if they win this week and next week. I think you get a good effort from Georgia Southern here, even though they're not as good as they've been in years past. I think they'd at least do enough to get a victory here against Georgia State. Let's make it official and make this our play of the week. We're going to go with Georgia Southern minus 2.5, rotation number 403. The Georgia Southern Eagles minus 2.5 to take down Georgia State. That's your college football play of the week. All right, that'll wrap up my look at college football for this weekend. I am Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review.
Go to SBRodds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.